When scope creep happens, do you treat it as a project management issue? Today's guest doesn't see it that way. She compares it to going in for what you think is a shoulder injury and finding out the real issue is somewhere else in your body entirely. Project management issues, she says, are often just the symptom. The cause is usually hiding a few steps back. Talia Palermo is the innovation manager at Function Point, where she talks to agency owners all day. In this episode, you'll hear why overservicing keeps showing up as agency owners' top frustration and why 56% of agencies say they don't have enough information at the start of a project to scope it properly. Here's my conversation with Talia. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. Growing a boutique agency can feel like you're always the underdog, competing against bigger shops with bigger budget. But small agencies aren't the underdogs. You're the upgrade. Here on this podcast, I'll help you see your size as the advantage it actually is and build a business that's profitable, sustainable, and doesn't depend on you to keep running. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I've worked behind the scenes in multiple seven-figure agencies, coached and consulted with more than 180 agency owners, and supported an agency owner through a successful sale and exit. I'm also the founder of Agency Together, a community where boutique agency owners build the collaborations and strategic partnerships that help them grow. Here on the podcast, you'll get real-world insights and practical ideas to help you work less, earn more, and grow without burning out. Hey friends, welcome back to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. Have you ever felt like you're spending more time defending your pricing? If so, you're definitely not alone. Clients want to talk about value, not just hours, and that's fine. Except if you don't actually know your numbers behind the scenes, that conversation can get dangerous fast. Today, I'm joined by Talia Palermo, Innovation Manager at Function Point, and her job is to talk to agency owners all day long, hear what's keeping them up at night, and figure out what's missing before most of them even know how to ask for it. So this episode isn't some theory conversation. It's really just what agency owners are telling her right now in real conversations. We're getting into why value-based pricing is a lot more complicated than it sounds. Why time tracking, even though everyone hates it, is still something most agencies can't afford to skip. And the handful of KPIs that actually matter if you want a real read on your profitability. Talia is also hosting a conversation on this exact topic at the Agency Together Mastermind Mingler here in Vancouver on September 17th. So if any of this resonates, that's a great place to keep digging in, along with a bunch of other curated topics. Talia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Happy to be here.
I know you talk to a lot of agency owners and you hear what's frustrating for them. You also help them figure out what's missing. So how would you actually describe what you do if we strip away the corporate title for a second?
I always joke I have the most fun job out of anyone that I work with because I do just get to chat with people all the time. And really, the deeper we can go into these conversations with agency owners and leaders, I get to pull apart those problems. So it's very rewarding that way.
It sounds like your role is to tap into what is frustrating or challenging for agency owners. And because Function Point is about project management and profitability, you tap into those frustrations and you help define how your team can help relieve those pain points.
That's exactly it. Project management is such a large piece of what we do and the pain points that people bring to us. There's a lot that goes into the system, and it's almost like if you're going to an RMT or something of the sort where you're feeling pain in one area, but it's actually caused by somewhere else in the body. It's sort of similar to that, where I usually find if I ask like why enough and we dig in, you can trace it through somewhere else in a project's life cycle. Maybe it is in the project management, but maybe it's in the actual onboarding of this customer or how we set up their scope of work, something else.
That's a wonderful analogy. It brings to mind my last visit to a physiotherapist where I had thought I had a rotator cuff injury, but apparently it was connected to somewhere else in my body. What I'm hearing you say is in project management, it may look like a project management issue, but it might stem from somewhere else. So what are agencies actually telling you is frustrating about project management right now? If you had to name the top few things you keep hearing over and over again, what would they be?
Overservicing is always being brought up. I think agencies just want to do right by their customers and give them something that works well for them. So, it's all coming from a good place. But the reason for that overservicing tends to change quite often with different trends. Right now, alongside overservicing, it's validating their work and the value of it. It's hard enough for us to go back and have that change in scope or put in a change order and ask for more budget. It's even harder now when we're trying to then say, well, this is taking me longer. And somebody might be asking the question of, are you using AI? Or are you not using AI? And having to have that conversation alongside validating the work that you're providing. It's a bit of a tougher conversation.
That's a big conversation that agencies are having right now with their clients. We all know that AI has changed that conversation, and clients do want to know, where does the value of the work actually live? In your perspective, when you talk to agency owners, where do they think the value of the work actually lives?
There is so much in consulting and in being that subject matter expert for their clients. Agency owners, for the past few years, actually, in our creative industry report, we've seen trends in their strategy services going up and up, more and more strategy. So I would say that really is what people are doubling down on, even more so when their customers might be turning towards in-house tools. These agency owners are really promoting their strategic services so that you can still use them alongside in-house teams working to achieve certain things. I spoke with an agency owner last week who said that they had a customer of theirs come back to them with the pieces of what AI gave them. And they said, this doesn't make any sense. Please help us put this back together for us because we broke it. So there's going to be, and I've seen the trend of a lot of agency owners seeing some of their customers turn towards those in-house solutions. But I am seeing it shift backwards now too, which is interesting.
It's exciting. We have tools that can do things faster for us and help us be more efficient. I don't think that those tools make marketing obsolete. People do want to see what those tools can do, but where people are going to feel the gap is strategy. People understand what is good practice and not good practice for a specific industry or niche in particular, because you can use some of those tools and they can be very generic. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm glad that you shared the example about an agency owner who got brought back into the conversation after someone told them that they didn't need them anymore. So I think a lot of agency owners hearing that feel that is going to be more the case as we see people dive into these tools. When it comes to things like more strategy and more consulting, how do you make sure those hours are tracked appropriately? Sometimes those things can be happening in offshoot emails or offshoot conversations. What are your thoughts on that in terms of a project management perspective?
With strategic services, I suggest some big buckets for time tracking, making sure we don't get too nitty gritty in terms of where time has to go, because we absolutely want to make sure time gets tracked to those things. But like you said, it's in the conversations and the emails that are being sent. It's not necessarily an Illustrator file pulled open that we can really clock. So big buckets, try not to get too specific about it, but still block time out. If it even needs to be a 10-hour task that spans a week, this is how much I'm dedicating for this strategic direction on this project. Make sure it still exists on the board so that we can clock it.
Of course, agencies are going to have strategic conversations where they book the hour to do that, but we all know that oftentimes those conversations do happen outside of those booked calls. Let's get back to time tracking in a second. I actually want to go back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier. You have done some research across a number of agencies and have been able to surface some data and patterns. I'd love to know how many agency owners were included in the research. What was the research about? And were there any interesting patterns that you saw come up from that research?
So overall, this last one in 2025 industry report would have been, I believe it was 256. And it's agency owners, but also we have project managers. We sample quite a few people across the agencies. And every year it is so interesting. There's usually a couple questions that produce some very interesting results. We've been doing this since 2021, I want to say, and it really is the trends over each report that is quite cool. With the value-based pricing specifically, there was quite a surge for the agencies doing value-based pricing back in 2023. And then over the last couple of years, it's actually tapered off a bit. And I think that resonates with some people maybe implementing it and it not quite working right or being the best fit for their agency. It hasn't gone away by any means. It's still very much there, but there was a bit of a surge and it's come back down now as some people are adjusting to it in their agency. With that, I would say that over servicing and that validating of the value agencies are providing is really represented in the fact that 56% of agencies say that they don't have enough information at the start of a project to actually define scope properly. That's a large number. It makes a lot of sense then why people go over budget and over service. I think those two problems are really a big symptom of this. If we were to really hone in at the beginning of a project, it also makes sense why people turn towards value-based pricing.
That is a big number. 56% of agencies say they don't have enough information at the start of a project to define scope properly. And that begs the question, what type of information do agencies need in order to scope properly?
Ultimately, it's the desired outcomes. It is the true value and the outcome that their customer is hoping to land upon. And if we can have a couple qualitative outcomes, but also quantitative outcomes so that we can point to those numbers and say, we achieved that for you, that's massive. But people don't have enough to define scope properly. It is because we're not asking questions specific to the customer in that moment, but it really is hearing out their pain points. I can speak from it personally, even with onboarding agencies to our software. We always ask, like, what are the main pain points that you're looking to solve? And putting a timeline on that of like, this is when you're going to see it by and we're going to make sure you do, instead of saying this is how many hours you're going to get, because that feels really arbitrary and is really not worth putting your money on.
I'm a champion of niched agencies. So agencies that have an industry niche. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's important, because it is actually easier to define your scope when you work within a specific niche and understand how that project has played out over and over again across multiple number of clients. I'm not surprised that 56% of agencies don't have enough information. I think if you're servicing multiple different niches, things are going to come up for you that you don't expect, and that's going to throw you for a loop and require, like we talked about, one of the challenges agencies have, which is over servicing, not accounted for in your project management. And the other thing you've been talking a lot about is value-based pricing. Agency life, we all love value-based pricing. We want to charge for what we're going to deliver in terms of the value, not by hours. And value-based pricing is not going anywhere, but value-based pricing can make it hard for you to scope that project. It can make it feel like it's hard to scope that project, but value-based pricing has a different internal and external function. So externally, you're saying to a client, look, we're not identifying the hours we work, we're identifying the value we bring to your business. That's the external messaging. Internally, though, you got to know your numbers. If you want to be profitable in your agency, you've got to know your numbers. Why do you think that value-based pricing has become such a sore spot for agencies when it comes to profitability?
People have thought about it as this other way to doing things and then thrown out the way that they were doing it before, when really going into it, it's important to know it's and, it's not or. You're doing value-based pricing, but that's one more thing for you to be tracking and monitoring. You're still doing that on top of what you were doing before, which is estimating hours and identifying the appropriate rates. So sometimes people could get overwhelmed by that because it's not necessarily less work. You are doing one more thing, but the values there.
If someone wasn't doing value-based pricing, how would they approach the project management? And then what are you seeing people throw out the window when they use value-based pricing?
If an agency wasn't doing value-based pricing at all, the normal scope of work, at least in our system, would be hours times rate is the billable amount. And that is for the services. Now, some people will do like package pricing and whatnot. And ideally, you still want your hours times your rate to be about the same amount. But then when people moved into value-based pricing, it was just putting a billable value on deliverables, those deliverables being outcomes, those qualitative or quantitative ones. And they threw away the old estimate. And that's really tough because now I have no concept for what the intended effort is to actually achieve those things. And that really impacts so many numbers. First of all, profitability, because a really key number in profitability is effort, however you want to track that, but it relates to cost. So we need to have some measure of cost on a project. Otherwise, we're constantly going to be chasing it and inferring it. And then capacity as well. If I'm not estimating, even from that scope of work stage, if I'm not estimating time, I can't see my capacity filling up and filling up. I have no idea what sort of white space I have in the next few weeks or months to take on new work. It happens pretty quick for agencies too.
In order for us to stay true to profitability and what you just mentioned, which is being internally aware of what's going on, time tracking is important. Like, time tracking is one of those things that, as much as agency owners and people in agencies dislike it, it still has to happen. Now, with that understanding, what do you think could make time tracking easier for the agency owner and the agency team?
Yeah, balance is the first thing that comes to mind. We have to find that balance in how accurate we want it to be. And believe me, I want it to be as accurate as possible, but we can't wait on it being perfect. And I know that probably sounds weird coming from me when we have time tracking software, but some agency owners would say, I don't bother tracking time because it's only based on a memory. It's never going to be perfect. And if we wait on it to be perfect, we will never have the data that we need. It's going to be made better if we are asking our team to track their time during the day or at least on the week. It's a chore doing your timesheets for the last over week or 2 weeks. A month is absolutely made up. That's, but if you're doing it on the day, then yes, it's another task, but it's a lot less painful. So find your team the best possible time tracking solution that you can. Invest in that because that's what's going to make it easier on them. And then make sure it shows up in their life in a way that proves valuable. Because a lot of objections to it is it presents itself as surveillance, but really time tracking advocates for all of those individuals in many different ways, whether that is new hires to support capacity and better planning for the next project so people across the business feel less frustration. And point that out, we were able to make this decision because of these numbers. It's interesting because I'll go back to our industry report as well, but 71% of agencies said that they track time, and only 29% of those agencies said that they trust the data. So there's a huge discrepancy there in trusting the data that our team is putting in, and we have to figure out ways to bridge that gap and get closer to it.
I think one of the ways you mentioned to bridge that gap is this concept of presenting it, and not just presenting it, but truly representing it less as surveillance and more as avocation. That is a mindset shift. And if we are able to look at time tracking as an opportunity to advocate for certain things in the business, things that will provide more resources to the team, the more likely the team is actually going to be doing the work of time tracking. What do you see agency teams or agency owners using that data to advocate for that could be encouraging for team members?
That's a good question. This all comes from the agency owners that I speak to. And the question that I would be asking them to get to the root of this is, what decisions will you make from this data? It's a really key piece to any report that I help them build, but especially with time tracking, what decisions are you going to make based on this? It is new hiring. Absolutely. That one comes up the most. We need to have the evidence to prove that we can hire more people and lessen the burden that's on our current staff. Sometimes that feels a little far in the future for teams to really internalize every day and feel motivating to them. So I would say it does come back to making sure they have the right team members on a project. If we know every day how much time is tracked on this project, where our budget is sitting, we might be able to accommodate putting additional resources on and lightening the load of this one individual project that we're all feel on our shoulders. If we have the most up-to-date time tracking on it, we can make better daily project management decisions, which means we're not going in guessing when we're adding more people to help us get this project across the finish line. We've thought it through.
What actually breaks when an agency stops tracking time consistently? And do you have an example of what that actually looks like once it starts slipping?
Utilization is one that I think is just far away enough in people's minds that they forget it's really heavily tied to time tracking. You need it. You need time in order to get utilization, and it is so essential. Sort of going back to that last piece about lightening the load for team members, if we're constantly busy, but profit is low, utilization is the first thing that I would want to look at to ensure we're spending time on the right thing. And it's also the first thing to break if we're not tracking time. Something that I was actually helping an agency with a couple months ago is they were struggling to get their team to track time. We needed to figure out where that balance existed. And typically, if you are using a utilization report like out of the box, the equation for it is the percentage of a team's all time tracked that is spent on billable work. That's typically what an out of the box utilization percentage is going to be based on. But what I suggested for them is let's do capacity based utilization. So have your team track absolutely all their billable time. Ideally, I want all their non-billable time spent on customer projects as well, but don't make them track all of the non-billable internal projects right now. If that's too much for them, let's leave it off. Because if we're doing capacity-based utilization, we can just look at this as what portion of their capacity has been spent on billable time. And it just, like I said, keep saying balance. We meet in the middle a little bit. We can work towards it. And it gave them all the data they needed.
I love that. It's getting someone to take that action first by not being perfect at it. I think that's absolutely necessary. Any agency owner listening to this, we're busy. We're busy people, and asking us to track every single minute of our day and asking our team to track every single minute of the day is honestly just, it's overwhelming. So I love how you've broken this down into what might be achievable if someone's wondering, how do I actually make this a thing for us in our agencies? Now, the other interesting data that you mentioned, 71% of agencies say they track time, but only 29% of them say they trust that data. What does that mean?
Right?
What does that mean? Let's decode that a bit.
Yes. I've had the experience before where an agency owner came to me and they said, we're looking at this time and these metrics for, I can't remember, it was probably something relating to profitability or utilization. They're like, these don't look right at all. And then we realized that our team hasn't been tracking time for 2 months. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did it get to 2 months? We should know that after a week. We should absolutely know it after 2 weeks. I think the longer you spend between looking at those KPIs, those really high level agency health metrics, the less you're going to trust them, first of all, because you're not seeing them every single day. You're not being able to note those discrepancies, but also you're going to really miss when something starts failing in the engine for that equation. We're asking what this number is far later than we have the ability to actually do anything about it. I would say as well, there's agencies that would come to me and say, we want to get a number that gives us this insight and this insight. I would say, if you have numbers that you are looking at within your agency, and typically these are ones that we all use, like utilization and profit margin percentage, and you don't trust them, fix those first. Those absolutely have to be fixed first, because not only is it a number that you can't get that you need, but we're sinking time into it, like time tracking, and that's just wasted effort. And I hate to see wasted effort for that.
Tracking is important for profitability. It's absolutely necessary for that. It's not just about profitability. Tracking can be advantageous on different decisions.
If we're looking for that number after the fact, of course, we have no ability to change it. It's just a metric that tells us what our profitability was. And I really like to see agencies using profit as a way to project manage. So it's part of the estimating process, in which case we're looking at what is our estimated billable amount for this project and what are our estimated costs for this, thinking expenses, but also time, the cost for those team members that we plan to be on the project. And having that set from the beginning, especially so that we can make sure there's a nice buffer in there. If we know things tend to trend over budget, let's make sure we have enough margin in our planned profitability to account for that. So we can overservice a little bit, especially if this is an important customer and we have a great relationship, without compromising the profitability on the project.
The future purpose is estimation. If we can look at what makes the project profitable and what didn't make it profitable, the next time we run that, it's easier for us to make those estimations. And that's what you're really pointing to, is the ability to identify trends.
Absolutely. The trends. How great would it be if we were able to spot a trend on the variance for specific clients? Maybe we can see we always go off mark by 5% on this. We could start building that in and allocating for it so much easier.
Some of the main takeaways that I've gotten from our chat today: time tracking doesn't need to be perfect. I know that sounds so weird, but doing it versus not doing it, you might as well do it not perfect, because it's going to get you data to make better decisions. And the sooner you're able to implement some of those time tracking things that just seem so frustrating and annoying to you and your team, the more likely, of course, you know when you're profitable and when you're not, but also you're able to estimate into the future with a lot more clarity opportunity. And the other thing that I really enjoyed hearing is how time tracking is presented to a team matters. When it's presented as surveillance, of course, nobody wants to feel like, hey, I'm time tracking because the boss wants to know if I am using my time appropriately versus advocation. If the team can understand that time tracking allows additional resources for them, and you got to put money to where the words are. You can't just say it, you got to do it. In addition to that, you also mentioned three key things that agency owners need to be tracking. The effective hourly rate is one key thing, the profit margin percentage, and the utilization.
Yes, absolutely.
If you had to leave agency owners with just one shift in how they think about pricing and profitability, what would that be?
It would be by the time you are asking what a number is, it's too late to fix it. And so if what is top of mind for you is profitability, make sure profitability is part of the entire project lifecycle, from estimation to the active work to then in review too. But so often we make it just the review, and it really has to be something we have line of sight on the entire way.
I know this topic is not the most exciting topic for agency owners to tap into, and I appreciate you spending time to clarify what agency owners need to be looking at when it comes to profit margins and project management. The value really is understanding what makes this easy to do and making it easy for your team to do. If you're listening to this and you want more insight into this conversation, we have an event coming up on September 17th in Vancouver. It's an in real life event. If you're listening to this before then, come check it out. The link will be in the show notes, and it is called the Mastermind Mingler. And Talia will be there to talk more about project management, profitability, and helping agency owners get better at tracking so that you have more control over your numbers. I'm excited to have Talia there. And Talia, if people were looking for you, where could they find you online?
You can absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always open for some great conversations, and I love talking about reports. So
Thank you so much for being here.
I really appreciate it, and looking forward to our conversations in September.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app and share it with a friend. I'll see you on the next one.